Welcome, workers and friends. Welcome back to Working Class Revolt. I'm your host, Dus James, the Marxist Leninist truck driver, coming to you live from my humble home in rural North Carolina. And as always, I'm very glad to be joined by my great co host. I jokingly call him the Thunder from Down Under, union organizer, Brother David Fox. How are things out there this morning in Australia?
Oh, very good, thank you. Hope things going well up there.
Well, it's good to hear from you. And we are in it for a special treat today. We are very honored to have, for the first time, um, Brother William Morrison, who is a young comrade from the United Kingdom, and he is the lead admin of the party of Communist Party of Facebook, which he has spent either months or years organizing. It's one of the leading party of communist parties on Facebook and organizations. And he is a brilliant organizer and speaker, and we're glad to have him. So, brother William Morrison, how you doing?
Yeah, thank you, Dust James. I really appreciate that introduction. Yeah, my name's William Morrison. I live in Scotland, the UK, and yeah, I'm the admin and creator of the Facebook group, the Communist Party of Facebook. Um, it's a little thing that I started maybe 3 years ago, and it's grown quite a bit, and it's got about 7.2 thousand members now. But yeah, essentially, I'm a Marxist Leninist and anti-imperialist, um, and I'm a British comrade. I'm from Britain. I classify myself as British. Um, I live in Scotland, but yeah, I'm a British comrade, and I'm happy to be here. So thank you very much, James, for the opportunity.
It's very good to get that introduction out the way. And we are very happy tonight. This is our last installment of our ongoing study of Stalin, the foundations of Leninism. Um, this right here was for many of the old, we're talking about bringing back that old school communism. We're talking about when communism was mass and communism was working class. In the 1930s and 40s in the United States, there was hundreds of thousands of members of the Communist Party, and there was millions of people that were being led by organizations that had leadership in the Communist Party. And some of those practice and some of those meetings and organizations, split groups, CPA USA itself, later on, this was required reading. And it was also political education, a series of lectures by Stalin himself in the Soviet Union at a time when they were industrializing rapidly. And there was a new day on the horizon. People that were in absolute poverty and, backwards feudal positions. Stalin said that all of the contradictions were going on in Russia beforehand, and the people could not live, and that's what pushed the people to first overthrow the czar and then overthrow the bourgeoisie itself and form the first largest socialist revolution in history, taking that backwards semi-feudal country in Europe to destitute poverty to a world power through a succession of 5-year plans within a number of decades, and then defeating the Nazis. This is absolutely beautiful stuff, absolutely cutting edge at the time, and it's not, and a lot of people say there's nothing that has compared to that since, but certainly history has continued as we see. But this is a great thing to study, and we're finishing it up now. And this chapter we're doing today is the last chapter, and it's called Style and Work. It's very short. We're going to go over it. Let's see. We'll start with David Fox. Any introductory remarks to the piece?
Well, the most important thing is, I think it's a great piece to read. I highly recommend it to all the comrades out there and anyone else that's interested in Marxism and how to learn it. I know we've talked about William Z. Foster's History of the Three Internationals and and a few others, but this is really excellent work. It's an introduction to it. It's easy to read. I mean, some chapters may look big, but it's actually quite easy to read, and it's designed so it's easily understood without saying making it too technical or too academic. In such, it's there for common working class people to understand. That's where he was addressing, Sarah was addressing, but also too is who we're addressing too. And I think that's while they're always keeping that in mind. I think when we're actually writing pieces or talking about something, one, we get straight to the point, keep it simple, and maybe just hang around, maybe stick to two or three key points, because a lot of working class people like yourself, Dust, myself, and I know about William as well. We work long days and long hours and that. And I think especially if you just do like a long day of doing 12 hours, by the time you get home or want to do some time of reading, you can be really tired. So you don't want to be reading a long document. And that's what's vitally important about this. He broke it up in a series of lectures and to basically make it much easier to digest. It's actually a classic bit of work along with his work of dialectical and historical materialism as well, which I highly recommend also reading that for comrades who are interested in philosophy as well.
Let's see, Comrade William, any introductory remarks about the piece?
Here too in Britain, Foundations of Leninism is a required piece of reading for any communist here in Britain. It's an amazing book that really describes the key characteristics of Marxism Leninism. And this chapter in particular really kind of describes the ideal worker from a Marxist-Leninist vanguard party perspective, and in the eyes of a Marxist-Leninist, what the ideal characteristics of a worker is. And I think it's a required reading for any Marxist-Leninist or a person who's really serious about building socialism in their country. I think this is a very important piece of literature that you have to have on their bookshelf.
Thank you, Comrade. So, without further ado, we are going to begin our reading of the piece.
Just before we do, can I just add something? Just for the viewers, I may have, I'm just currently at the moment, something happened during the night. I'm just waiting. If I have a message from my partner, I might have to just drop off and pick her up or whatever. So I do apologise to all out there. It's just I won't get into the details. Nothing to be concerned about, but he's okay. But I'll just need to be on standby. That's all.
Thank you, Brother Fox. So Brother Fox may be leaving us, so don't freak out if he does. So we're going to begin the reading. This is the J.V. Stalin, The Foundations of Leninism, Chapter 9, Style and Work. We're going to be reading it a paragraph at a time. I'll start, then David, then William. It was about a page and a half. Here we go. I am not referring to literary style. What I have in mind is the style and work, that specific and particular feature and the practice of Leninism, which creates the special type of Leninist worker. Leninism is a school of theory and practice, which trains a special type of party and state worker, creates a special Leninist style and work.
What are the characteristic features of the style? What are its peculiarities? It has two specific features: A, the Russian revolutionary sweep, and B, American efficiency. The style of Leninism is a combination of these two specific features in party and state work. William. Yep. Your next, William.
Russian revolutionary sweep is an antidote to inertia, routine, conservationism, mental stagnation, and slavish submission to the ancient traditions. Russian revolutionary sweep is the life-given force which stimulates thought, impels things forward, breaks the past, and opens up perspectives. Without it, no progress is possible.
But Russian revolutionary sweep has every chance of degenerating in practice into empty revolutionary manivolism if it is not combined with American efficiency and work. Examples of this degeneration are only too numerous. Who does not know of the disease of revolutionary scheme, conducting, and revolutionary plan drafting, which springs from the belief and the power of decrees to arrange everything and remake everything? A Russian writer, one Enberg, in his story, the perfect communist man, has portrayed the style of a Bolshevist afflicted with this disease, who set himself the task of finding a formula for the ideal perfect man and became submerged in his work. The story contains a great exaggeration, but it certainly gives a correct likeness to the disease. But no one, I think, has so ruthlessly and bitterly ridiculed those afflicted with this disease as Lenin. Lenin stigmatized this morbid belief in conducting schemes and in turning out decrees as communist vainglory.
Communist vanity, says Lenin, is characteristic of a man who, while still a member of the Communist Party, not having yet been combed out of it, imagines that he can solve all the problems by issuing communist decrees. Lenin usually contrasted hollow revolutionary phase-mongering with plain everyday work, thus emphasising that the revolutionary improvisation is repugnant to the spirit and letter of true Leninism. The phone's going.
Fewer pompous phrases, more plain, everyday, says Lenin. Less political fireworks and more attention to the simplest but vital facts of communist construction. American efficiency, on the other hand, is an antidote to revolutionary mannerism and fantastic scheme concocting. American efficiency is that indomitable force which neither knows or nor recognizes obstacles, which with its business-like perseverance brushes aside all obstacles, which continues a task once started until it is finished, even if it is a minor task, and without which serious constructive work is inconceivable.
But American efficiency has every chance of degenerating into narrow, unprincipled practicalism if it is not combined with Russian revolutionary sweep. Who has not heard of that disease of the narrow empiricist and unprincipled practicalist, which has not infrequently caused certain Bolsheviks to degenerate and to abandon the cause of revolution? We find a reflection of this particular disease in the story by B. Plankot, entitled The Barren Year, which depicts types of Russian Bolsheviks of strong will and practical determination, who function very energetically but without vision, without knowing what is all about, and who therefore stray from the path of revolutionary work. No one has ridiculed this disease of practicalism so incisively as Lenin. He branded it as narrow-minded empiricism and brainless practicalism. He usually contrasted it with vital revolutionary work and the necessity of having a revolutionary perspective in our daily activities, thus emphasizing that this unprincipled practicalism is a repugnant to the true Leninism and revolutionary scheme concocting. William?
The combination of Russian revolutionary sweep with American efficiency is the essence of Leninism in party and state work. This combination alone produces the finished type of Leninist worker, the style of Leninism in work.
So that concludes our reading. I'm sorry there was a little bit of an interruption there. When David left, I may have took William out for a second, so you might not have heard there might be a few sentences that were left out. But I
I do
think
apologise about that. My partner's on her way. She's there, so had to take that call.
okay, good, good. So we'll move into our discussion, and we'll start with a round of initial responses. And I just want to start. I am a part of the Center for Political Innovation, proud member, dues paying member now, which is a think tank, not a party, but they are one of the leading groups and using the tool of patriotic socialism to reach out to the masses and use the positive elements around patriotism, the love of one's country, the love of the people around you, the love of the very unique culture and circumstances in which your country it is, and they're unique specifically to America. And we have got a lot of ridicule and attacks, being told we're no better than Trump supporters, being told we're Nazis and we're fascists, for appealing to people's better sentiments for the purpose of fighting for socialism and building a new world free of racism and labor exploitation and national oppression. And I think it's some of the absolutely ludicrous statements and attacks we've had are like, people would believe that Stalin, the great revolutionary, one of the greatest revolutionary in history, who led the Soviet Union to unprecedented industrialization, that people all over the world look up to. You know, um, he out of his own mouth is he respects the American worker, and he respects the efficiency and the culture, the aspect of the American worker. The Industrial Revolution really started in England, but through colonial, it was through the capital created through colonialism. But it was the British workers and the fortitude of the British workers that built those industries. And then later on, when the United States took the lead position as the industrialized power, there was also colonialism and horrible things. But it was the efficiency of the American worker, which was international. We're talking about black workers. We're talking about Chicano and Mexican workers, Chinese workers. We're talking about immigrants from Eastern Europe, immigrants from throughout Europe and around the world that came to this growing industrial society, and through hard work built the infrastructure and putting their nose to the grindstone. When I think about this idea of the efficiency of the American worker, I also think of the '90s blue collar comedian, redneck comedian, Larry the Cable Guy, and his affirmation of "get her done," to start a task and finish it. Really means something. So the ideal of Stalin, the ideal revolutionary worker, is a combination of the efficiency of the American worker and the new revolutionary energy of breaking forth and building the new system of socialism. And I think that right there throws all the criticisms and absurdities of those who are more focused on identity.
Yeah.
And more focused with associating themselves with morality, and rejecting their coworkers, and saying they're better than everyone else because they're the socialists, and they don't even want to identify with China. They don't even want to identify. A lot of them don't even want to identify with Vietnam. Oppressed people are actually building socialism, but their specific type of social, the better. This piece by Stalin just throws those criticisms out of the water. That's my initial response to the piece. Let's see, Comrade Fox, what is your initial response to the piece?
Well, I mean, the initial response. I mean, for us here in Australia, I look. Yeah, you're talking about love of country or love of land. I mean, that's land has got to be part of that. And I think something to be proud of for us in Australia. We've got the world's oldest living culture. the indigenous culture of this land, and listening to them as well. They've got a very a lot of them have got a very interesting perspective on things. It's excellent to listen to, and that's something to be proud of. We've also got a tradition of, being against authority here, especially from the 1800s with the Chartists moving over here, the convict revolts, the Goldfields rebellions, which was actually a direct challenge to class rule, to the squattocracy, the top military brass, etc., right through to actually union militancy, and also, I mean, right through to many things as well, through to even big social movements. So it's actually funny enough, the working class, right up to the 1980s, was not just central to it, but was in the leadership of it. The Vietnam moratorium was working class led, led by the unions, communist union leaderships, you can name it. They led it, and we were successful. We're proud to stand the traditions of anti-colonial struggle. It's for helping Indonesians forming their own independence when waterfront unions refused to load Dutch ships. They also, too, 1938, waterfront workers in the industrial city of Port Kemper refused to load pig iron on ships, which was destined for Imperial Japan, which was going to be made into weapons grade or weapons to destroy Chinese people, but also eventually us as well. That's something to be proud of. All these traditions that they played was anti-imperialist, was pro-working class, it was there to lead direction, and that's something we need to harness into again. And also, too, yes, there's something a little bit character of the Australian trade has been a little bit anti-authoritarian. The simple reason being it's because the way it's a history of it going right back to the convict years as well. But also standing side by side with Indigenous people as well, struggling to move forward. That's something to be proud of. So when I hear people going, yeah, fascist and everything else, they don't have a clue what fascism actually is. Fascism, Nazism, whatever, its primary purpose is destroy communism and working class power at all costs. Anti-Semitism and all that comes that's part of it, but that comes later on with it. That's what Marxism is. It's there to uphold, maintain imperial rule, with brute force and terror. And I think that people have forgotten about that, and they need to actually certainly do their homework again and read what it really is. And I think it's I think it's confusing now with national and confusing national chauvinism with something like loving your land, loving the people around you. I don't say, yeah, Australia, best country, we're better than anyone else and net of this and put this other country sucks and everything else. That's national chauvinism, trying to demonise other countries. No, we've got a lot of potential here, and everything else moving forward. I know there was a comment about, let's be internationalists in our monument, and I think that's right. We are international as well. Love of land, but we also do this a love of each other, and we want to advance forward. We don't want to keep tying back to old ways and which were destructive and everything else. We want to move forward and make it a better society to live on. So what this little piece has worked on is actually destroy the myth there. Stop your petty stuff. Look at what's primary. Focus on that, and I like to actually quote an old comrade that passed away. It's an old communist. He died in his mid-90s. A bloke called Vic Williams, and he actually played a good role with me as well and understanding of things. And he mentioned about Stalin's work. One words he said, it's solid stuff. And he said one great line he said to me and a couple of comrades at the time: find the fundamental line and stick to it. Find what's primary and stick to it. Okay, and that's what, out of all this mess, what's primary, and let's stick to it, because we can easily get diverted and easily get sidetracked into all this stuff. And I had I'm not trying to take up too much time, but someone was putting an argument about what's going on at the moment over Ukraine. I won't talk about that at the moment, but the fact is they're putting their 10 cents worth in, because all of a sudden everyone's a war expert all of a sudden. And anyway, if you noticed on social media, anyway, he's putting on about, and now we're free, and he's putting down obviously to Russia and China and everywhere else. And I said, oh, you've been to those countries. Oh, yes, I have, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, if you have been there, you should have known better than put silly statements here. Anyway, he's going on, well, but we've got freedom to choose. We can choose this party. I can vote for this party and vote for that party. I thought about it and I decided I'm going to hit him what's primary. So, I think and I said to him, I replied to him, he hasn't come back to me at all. I've hit him with a king hit. I said to him, so I think your turn of choice differs from those low income people. Or one, about 2 or 3 paychecks from poverty, from unemployment, job insecurity, foreclosing on their mortgage, trying to survive day to day. They don't have a choice, unfortunately. So I think the argument's there completely gone. So, yeah, I'm just waiting for them to reply back on that one. Choice, eh? Well, what's that choice? So, so that's why I'm important. We need to stick to that fundamental line. Sorry to take up a little bit too much time, but
No, thank you. Very spirited contribution, Brother Fox. See, Comrade William, what is your initial response to the piece?
My response is nowhere near as long as Comrade Fox's, but yeah, essentially what Stalin is saying, in my opinion, from my perspective, is that the ideal worker, the communist worker, from a Marxist-Leninist party, vanguard perspective, is a comrade that not only is very principled and sticks to revolutionary Marxist theory, but is also a worker, a communist worker that is highly productive and driven and motivated. And I think that Stalin is highly, respecting and looking up to the American worker. Obviously, this book was written in 1924, when America was essentially booming economically, and it was just before the Great Depression. And I think Stalin is definitely referring to the hard-working mentality and the high productivity of American workers. And I think he's giving a lot of respect to American workers. And yeah, and I think that this chapter of this book is a very good refutation and repudiation of the anti-communist idea that socialists and communists are just young white people that want the government to do stuff for them and want free stuff. This this chapter, even though it's small, is a very big rejection of that idea, the anti-communist idea that socialists these days are just young white people that just want the government to do stuff for them and want free stuff. This chapter is pretty much saying that the ideal worker, the ideal communist worker, is a worker that is not only driven by revolutionary Marxist theory, but is also driven literally just through productivity. They want the hard work. They want to work very hard. They're very productive. They're willing to work very long hours. And that is because they're driven by revolutionary Marxist theory. They're driven by Marxist theory, and that is what drives them. They're not driven by profit or money or any of the capitalist elements of political economy. They're driven by the political will to complete communist construction in their respective societies. And so, yeah, I think Stalin, to an extent, is very much respecting the work mentality of American comrades. And yeah, in that they're very hardworking, they're very driven, they're very motivated, and all Stalin wants is the addition of those workers to be revolutionary minded and to be disciplined comrades. And yeah, I think it's this chapter of the book is a very good rejection of the anti-communist idea that socialists and communists are just lazy white young people who just want the government to do stuff for them and want free stuff. This chapter explicitly says that the ideal communist worker is a worker that is a hard worker, highly committed and highly dedicated to revolutionary Marxist theory. And it pretty much says that laziness and wanting the government to do stuff for us is an anti-communist idea, and that communism does not want people to be lazy or unproductive. In fact, it's on the contrary. This chapter pretty much clearly explains that workers want the Marxist-Leninist vanguard party want workers to be hardworking and disciplined and committed to the revolution. Not lazy, not unprincipled, not aimlessly working for no reason. They want people to be disciplined and principled. And I respect that and I strongly support that. And I think it's a great repudiation of the anti-communist idea that we're all just lazy white people who want the government to give us free stuff. That's absolutely not true. So that's my interpretation of this chapter.
Thank you, comrade. Very well spoken. Needs repeating sometimes. Thank you, brother. Maybe we can move on a bit and kind of look at it deeper. I wanna first start saying that regardless of what Stalin thought, when we think of the idea of the efficient worker, I something I love about Stalin is the simple way in which he writes, and he's a man of his time, and he writes in a way, that's a lot easier to grasp than if you're reading Marx or even Lenin. Stalin is the person that took, these theories and took what was, more in tune with the cafes of Europe. And, there was the Union movement and the First International.
Yep.
But he took something that was more intellectual and he took it to the most backward part in Europe and united peasants and workers. And when you put an idea is only a physical force, when is it in the mind of the masses? An idea is useless until it's an idea of the masses, and then it becomes a physical thing. That becomes a physical force, and the class character of the people who have it, determines the class character of that idea itself, and the class character of that physical force itself. So I recently made a post that Stalin took Marxism out of the cafes of Europe and into the factories in the fields of the East, which inspired people like Mao, who brought Marxism to the oppressed world. And we've seen Marxism be championed in the oppressed nations. I think that's very important. Yeah. And that goes along with the discussion here. It's not just revolutionary decrees. It's not just you're the best theorist ever. It is, if there is no, unless you're like, I think Fred Hampton was like, theory ain't shit without practice. If I could paraphrase. Now, as far as the spirit of efficiency, that was a linguistic tool at the time. But I think the idea of efficiency is far greater than, the simple idea of the American worker, which someone identify, you think of American, you think of a white person or something like that. But I think it was way bigger than that. The American proletariat was international. This is talking about former slaves. This is talking about sharecroppers, black and white together. This is talking about Eastern European immigrants. This is talking about the Chinese people who died building the railroads in this country. This is talking about the efficiency of the worker in general, which doesn't apply only to America, but it is an international ideal. I think Stalin, was just flippantly using the kind of generalizations of the time period to make this larger point about joining efficiency and revolutionary inspiration. Now, I think this really does go against what we're seeing. Notice the trend is that a lot of people they get involved in Marxism not because they truly want to improve the conditions of their community, not because they want to see the oppressed people to take control over their own countries, build up infrastructure and improve their lives and their own sovereignty. But a lot of people get into Marxism because they become rejected from the current society. Either an intellectual character or something just doesn't jive with the people around them. So they seclude themselves. And then they find Marxism, on their own, and they come to these understandings. And when they do that, they kind of lose hope of this practicality, of this efficient. It becomes more like a religion or a moral foundation. It's an identity. It's an identity to say, I am better than the working people around me because I am a socialist. And this is why a lot of the Marxists reject patriotism. This is why a lot of Marxists, so-called Marxists, refuse, or ultras, and refuse to accept the contributions of comrades from the oppressed world. And I think if Comrade Stalin was to write this piece in today's era, he would say that I honestly think you would find both of these characteristics in the Chinese worker today. The Chinese worker today, which has grown their economy 4 times that of the United States for the last 40 years, has seen unprecedented growth. And mind you, without the slavery of the United States, without killing off all the Chinese workers to build the railroad. What the Chinese have accomplished today is absolutely amazing. And I think they're leading the charge on this. I know I said a lot. I went on for a while. But maybe we can continue this discussion. I'm not sure if David Fox, he's with us. Maybe we go over to our younger comrade, brother William. I know you were out for a minute there. But what are your ideas about, taking it away from, just these nationalities, American, Russian, but sorry, what is the larger meaning of this, and how does it apply today, Comrade William?
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with you, Dust, that when Stalin talks about American efficiency, I think nowadays that idea is kind of obsolete, and pretty much it's an international issue, well, not issue, but actually a virtue, that the international proletariat, the international working class, is a very hardworking, motivated. I mean, the working class in all countries are the backbone of the economy, and I think you made a good point there. It's no longer, Stalin points to American efficiency as an example, just one example. But I mean, nowadays, in the state we are now internationally, it's safe to say that the international proletariat is a hardworking, motivated group of people. And like you said, China has done so much good. I mean, since 1985, they've taken almost 1 billion people out of poverty, which is insane. It's from a Western perspective, that's completely it's unimaginable how a country and a government would be able to do that. Especially here in Britain, when 25% of children here in the UK live below the poverty line and have to worry about where the next meal is coming from, and have to worry about going to school and whether they can afford that kind of stuff. From a British perspective, what China has done is insane, and the productivity of the Chinese economy is thanks to the Chinese proletariat. It's thanks to the Chinese working class. Obviously, there's 99 million members of the Chinese Communist Party. There's about 70 million of the population of Britain, which means there's more members of the Chinese Communist Party than there are the entire population of the UK. The UK has a population of about 67 million people, and the official membership of the Communist Party is almost 100 million, which means there's more members of the Chinese Communist Party than there are the entire population of Britain, which is an insane, unimaginable number. It's absolutely insane. So, and that is not because of some Chinese billionaires. It isn't like people like Jack Ma, who is a Chinese billionaire, It isn't people like him. It's ordinary Chinese workers that are driving the economy forward. They're working in key economic sectors like infrastructure and transportation and science and technology. The progressive, future-minded sectors of the economy. That isn't down to billionaires or capitalism or imperialism, whatever the liberals and woke left criticize China about. China is driven by, in my opinion, the Chinese working class. It's Chinese proletarians who are leading the way. And they are the biggest reason why China is the economic powerhouse that they are today. And so, yeah, when Stalin talks about American efficiency, I don't think nowadays it's fair to just say that it's American workers. It's the international proletariat in general. The working class internationally are facing brutal oppression, both from capitalism, imperialism, and fascism. You see it in Ukraine today. There's self-proclaimed ideological neo-Nazis, death squads that have committed genocide against the people of Donetsk and Luhansk in Eastern Europe, in Eastern Europe, Ukraine, and it's insane. So Stalin doesn't just talk. Nowadays we can't just interpret the American efficiency as an American characteristic. It's international. All working class from all countries are hardworking, driven, motivated, and revolutionary-minded people, and that's a necessity. In the days of capitalism and imperialism, that kind of mentality is an absolute must, because it's that, or you side with the capitalists, and that will get you absolutely nowhere. So, yeah, this chapter of Foundations of Leninism is a required reading. Like I said prior, it's an absolute repudiation of the anti-communist idea that socialists nowadays are just white young people. They just want the government to do stuff for them. And it's also, it isn't just exclusive to American workers. It's nowadays it's international. The entire international proletariat, from Palestine to Russia, to America, to China, to Bolivia, to Venezuela, to Syria, to Belarus, to all the anti-imperialist bloc. The proletariat there is of so much importance and is due so much respect that they're not given by the mainstream media. And so yeah, that's my take. I don't know if you understood all that, but yeah.
Very good. See, Comrade Fox,
Yeah.
did you have to go, or can I ask a question?
Yes. I'm just going to get. I do have to go. Look, I'm sorry to cut this short, but yeah, and that. But we have to get going. Unfortunately, we had a few things happening last night, so it's all good. But yeah, look, it was great, and look, it's been good to meet you too, William. That one day we may meet in person. I hope you keep up the great work as well. But Dust, I'll keep in touch with you during the week, and we'll discuss moving forward. I do apologise, but yeah, just the circumstances out of our control. That's all.
Okay, thank you, brother.
No
Thank
worries.
you for joining us.
Well done, comrades. Keep up the good fight.
Okay, looks like brother Fox is had something come up and has to go. I was trying to get his last thought on it. This discussion, the idea of American efficiency, Russian revelry sweep. We discussed it further in detail. We applied it to today's situations. Now I want to bring up a few examples of how the synthetic left has got issues wrong recently, and how, if they truly understood this chapter, they would not. And I think the first one is the freedom convoy that's going on in Canada. Now, if your entire position on Marxism is that it is an identity to you, that it is something that you identify with yourself as being more or superior, the people around you, that you figured out something to do, and you don't actually work or build anything to get things done or build socialism, but you argue with random people on the internet that how you are superior. If that is your if that is your position, are you going to support workers in motion who may not have the best social views along with other views, or may not even be making the best demands? No, you're going to completely say no. I want nothing to do with that. But if you understand this chapter and you understand that um, the best revolutionary worker has both the get her done spirit, I'm gonna call that, and the revolutionary inspiration, a revolutionary sweep, they would recognize workers in motion coming up against a capitalist junior partner state like in Canada, and are having just democratic demands, like not wanting the vaccine. Now, it was sponsored by the right wing and it was pushed by the right wing. It's more than likely going to be co-opted into conservative campaigns. But we are seeing the largest convoy in history, and we are seeing mutual aid networks pop up. This is a popular uprising. These are workers in motion. They're coming up against this capitalist state, and these are legitimate grievances. And for us to say, oh, and the liberal media has been saying all these people are fascist and they had their fringe minority with unacceptable views or what have you. And for leftists, because they're in liberal spaces, to simply repeat the liberal media, trashing and demonizing an entire key portion of the workforce is absolutely disgusting and wrong. And if we want to have that grit and we want to have that good or done attitude, we're going to look at workers in motions, regardless of their ideas, and we're going to recognize the legitimate grievances. And then we're going to talk with them and push them further and build power that can actually achieve things. Instead of this blind intellectualism and Calvinist spirit. Brother William, any response to that specific issue?
Yeah, of course. As someone living in Scotland, in the UK, we're quite different from American and Canadian culture. And as a British comrade, I haven't really researched a lot about what's going on about the trucker convoy in Canada. But all I can say on the issue is that truck drivers and delivery drivers are one of the most important sections of the working class in capitalist society. Truck drivers are so important in making this civilization that exists in a sustainable and maintaining way. Truck drivers are so important and they're so underestimated. And if the truck convoy are truck drivers, wanting an improvement of their conditions and a support freedom for the people of America and Canada, then as a British comrade, I have nothing against that. On Facebook and online, for example, I've seen examples of certain parts of the truck convoy have fascistic elements, but I'm not an idiot. I don't think that is representative of the entire freedom convoy, and I think that the vast majority of this protest and of this movement is of just frustrated truck drivers and other people that are involved in the delivery service and stuff like that. They're just frustrated with the conditions in which they live. They pretty much entirely live on the road, delivering goods and services to the rest of the working class. And they aren't, in Britain anyway, I can't say this for America or Canada, but in Britain, they're not paid a good wage. Truck drivers in Britain are very underpaid, in my opinion. And for such an important job, they pretty much keep the trade industry running. I mean, all goods and services go to, are provided in Britain by truck drivers and by truckers, and they're not paid justly, in my opinion, in Britain. So yeah, if the Canadian truckers and American truckers want to protest and charter the government for improvement of their conditions and improvement of their pay, then I'm completely all for that. And if they're for freedom and they promise to represent the interests of the working class, again, I have nothing against that. Complete solidarity to all comrades and the workers who are exploited by the capitalist system. Nothing against them whatsoever. Absolute solidarity to you. I don't care what country you're from. If you are a worker or if you're a human being that's exploited by the capitalist system, I'm 100% on your side. And if you're serious about delivering socialism and building socialism in your country, I'll help you with that, and I'm completely on your side. So if the truck convoy, the Freedom Convoy in America and Canada, is a truly proletarian and working class movement, then absolutely, I completely support it, and solidarity to you. And I hope you get what you want, because in Britain, we don't have the opportunity to have a truckers movement in Britain. And in my opinion, in Scotland and in the UK in general, truck drivers are completely underpaid and do not get compensated for the hard work they do. So I hope things are different in the USA and Canada, and solidarity and comradeship to all of those workers fighting for improvement of working conditions.
Thank you, brother. I think we'll clear. I'll just clear up the issue. If folks want to go my positions on the trucker convoy further, I highly recommend the interview I did with Comrade Caleb Maupin. You can check out that interview. Essentially, it is pushing class struggle of workers in motion, regardless of their specific demands, and even regardless of the leadership that may be manipulating those legitimate grievances. So I want to look at the issue that everybody's talking about to end the show. I'm going to talk about the issue everyone's talking about, and that is the denazification of the Ukraine. I'm not calling a war. I'm not calling invasion. The denazification in the Ukraine that's going on right now from our anti-imperialist allies in Russia and their popular leader Vladimir Putin. So I'm going to talk about this issue. So maybe I'll just give a quick history of what's going on. In 2014, there was a coup carried out by NATO in the United States, putting in a government that is essentially controlled by neo-Nazis. The president of that government is Jewish. The actual party that holds the position of power is not openly neo-Nazi, but there was large sections and large amount of groups that were openly neo-Nazi that put them in the power. And when they were in power, if they defied the will and the desire of those openly neo-Nazi groups, they would have been taken out. So essentially, the Ukrainian government is a neo-Nazi controlled government. And we have this Azov battalion, which actually isn't really well controlled by that government. The Azov battalion, which is getting guns and weapons, is basically leaderless. They do whatever the hell they want. And what they want is to kill off ethnic Russian people, to kill off minorities, to kill off LGBTQ brothers and sisters. It's and in between. And that's what they've been doing for 8 years. And they have killed over 14,000 people. Right after the 2014, there was the eastern parts of the country that declared themselves to be independent people's republics, the Luhansk and the Donetsk. I'm not saying that right. The brother William can say it better. But then recently, the U.S. was saying, hey, Russia's going to invade. Russia's going to invade. Well, I honestly think the Russians had no intention of invading, but but the United States kept pushing it and kept pushing it, and there's evidence to believe that they told their Nazi pawns to escalate tension. The Nazi pawns started bombing different villages, putting things, and it pushed it to a point where Russia had no option but to respond. And when they responded, the mother of all sanctions, poverty grinding sanctions, went into effect. And when that happened, instead of just going into the republics and defending them, because they're already paying the price of the horrible sanctions, it was definitely the absolute strategic position to go all the way in and destroy the Nazi threat that was installed 8 years ago and is threatening their safety. Now, and when they did this, when Russia denazified the Ukraine, it wasn't just a victory for the ethnic Russians that were facing the violence of the neo-Nazis. It was a victory for the international proletariat and all anti-imperialists, because one of the largest countries in the world, the largest landmass country in the world, one of the largest world powers in the world, stood up against the dominance of the imperialism led by U.S. imperialism. Humanity's main enemy, imperialism, led by U.S. imperialism. They stood up against it. And it's this force globally that performs coups against socialist country, that performs coups against independent countries, that stops countries from growing and grinds them into poverty. And if anybody comes up against them, regardless if they're a capitalist government or not, regardless if the leader of that country doesn't have the best social views, when they defied U.S. imperialism, that gave an opportunity and space for the people of the world to rise up and push back against humanity's main enemy. And I say that Putin and Russia are capitalist, anti-imperialist allies of the people. And let's bring it back to the chapter. So if you think that Marxism and revolution is simply being identifying as a more moral superior person, you're not going to see the nuts and bolts and the material effects of standing against imperialism like our brothers and sisters in Russia and Putin were able to do with this denazification. You're not going to see the larger materials anti-imperialist struggle at the forefront. I know I put a lot of words out there, but brother William, if maybe you could give your thoughts on the specific situation, as well as this idea of the understanding of both get her done and revolutionary sweep is key to understanding this issue.
Yeah, of course. So as I start off, I just want to say that I stand completely in solidarity with the Russian forces, and I also stand in solidarity and support with the People's Republic of Donetsk and Luhansk in the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine. Donetsk and Luhansk are new nations which are officially recognized by Russia and many other countries that have chosen to follow Russia. And yes, as a British comrade who only lives about 2,000 to 3,000 miles away from the conflict, I'm pretty close to the conflict. And the Ukrainian government is absolutely neo-Nazi. It itself isn't neo-Nazi. It definitely supports and funds and sanctions neo-Nazis. Like Dust James said, the Azov battalion is openly neo-Nazi. It's a white supremacist neo-Nazi battalion. It's not even really a battalion. It isn't really under control of the Ukrainian government. It's pretty much a death squad. It's a death squad that's supported by the imperialist West to suppress and dispose of any opposition to the Ukrainian government. The Azov battalion, the military badge that the Azov battalion wear is the Sonnentraum sun, which directly correlates to Nazi Germany alchemy, in which a Nazi German alchemist made the idea that they could make a superior Nazi Aryan race using the blood of kind of editing and modifying the blood of ordinary Germans. The Sonnentraum sun is an openly fascistic and neo-Nazi symbol. It's a disgusting, sinister representation of the horrors of the Holocaust, for example, where 6 million Jews were systematically mass murdered by a neo-Nazi regime, and the likes of the Azov battalion, which isn't really under the control of the Ukrainian government, is pretty much acting independently by now. It's a separatist militia. It's an extremely right-wing neo-Nazi militia, and it has been responsible for the deaths and murder and execution of hundreds, if not thousands, of children, women, and innocent young men of Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine. The Azov battalion, as far as I know, is operating in southern Ukraine. It's defending the southern flank against the Russian troops that are advancing from Crimea. But yeah, even the badge that the Azov battalion wear is openly neo-Nazi. And Volodymyr Zelensky is also very, very fascistic, and I can't imagine anyone that could support him. The UN General Assembly voted a couple of years ago whether or not countries support the provocation of hate crimes against the LGBT and trans people. And Ukraine and the USA were the only two countries in the entirety of that election voted against the resolution of carrying out hate crimes against the LGBT community. Ukraine, a fascistic government, and the USA, they were the only two countries that voted against that resolution that would have supported LGBT comrades. Every other country pretty much voted against it, including Russia, China, Venezuela, Belarus, and Kazakhstan, which are obviously members of the anti-imperialist bloc. So yeah, my perspective on the situation in Ukraine is that Ukraine is a neo-Nazi government, or if not, it definitely supports neo-Nazi death squads that have carried out the deaths of 14, if not 15,000 deaths in eastern Ukraine since 2014. So in 8 years, 15,000 people have been murdered by the Ukrainian government or Ukrainian and Western imperialist backed death squads, not militias, death squads. And everyone's surprised that Ukraine, everyone is surprised that Russia has retaliated. Well, of course, Russia's retaliated. Russia was the first country to officially recognize Donetsk and Luhansk as people's republics, and many countries followed their suit. And Russia is pretty much just saying that Ukraine has repeatedly and historically violated the sovereignty of these two new nations by literally killing innocent people, civilians of these people, of these districts. So Russia is only attacking Ukraine. It isn't an invasion. It's a liberation of Ukraine. It's the denazification of Ukraine. And it's the protection and defense of the people's republics of Luhansk and Donetsk in the Donbass region of Ukraine. It isn't an imperialist or sinister or malicious or psychotic invasion of Ukraine, as the Western media might tell you. It's a liberation of Ukraine. It's letting Ukrainians think freely against the subjugation of Nazi ideology. And I stand with Russia and Vladimir Putin against the denazification of Ukraine. And I stand in complete solidarity with the people of Donetsk and Luhansk, who simply want independence from the neo-Nazi government of Ukraine and Volodymyr Zelensky, who is openly fascistic and is clearly a white supremacist. Yes, he's Jewish. He's a Jewish leader of Ukraine, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have fascistic views. And it doesn't mean that his government does not directly fund neo-Nazi death squads in eastern Ukraine. So I support Putin in his liberation and denazification of Ukraine, and I stand completely in solidarity with the People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. That's all from me.
Right on, brother. Right on. So this is kind of a complicated subject for some people, especially the identity Marxists. People who identify, I'm a Marxist, I'm the best, and you don't understand Marx as well as I understand Marx, and so on and so forth. This is a hard concept for them to understand, and if you don't see Marxism simply is an interesting, unique identity characteristic of yourself. You see Marxism as a tool. How Marx saw Marxism, how Lenin saw Marxism, how Stalin and Mao saw Marxism is a tool to better understand the world, or the political and physical world around us, and use that understanding as a guide of action to throw off the shackles of capitalism and the dying system and build a new system, a more advanced system that enables a better life for the people. And when you're building on the ground, when you're getting her done, it's dirty and it's messy, and it takes discipline, and it takes alliances, and it takes retreating sometimes, it takes charging sometimes, it takes courage, it takes standing up to be the only voice in the crowd, and it takes identifying with the people around you that you might not like and pushing them to fight for themselves and empowering the people around you. And right now, the global class struggle is anti-imperialism, because the main force holding us back is imperialism led by U.S. imperialism. So I think it's a good day. This is a good day. The fact that Russia finally was able, after they saw the injustices on their border and they wanted to do something about it, either from fear, or simply not wanting the West to sanction and destroy them, to them to finally get the gumption to push off the humiliation that has been pushed on the Russian people and their allies and the ethnic Russian people in the republics in former Eastern Ukraine. It is a good thing. Now, I got a comment say war is never good. I would like to put that out. And war is never good. Just like Lenin said that all states are repressive. But sometimes a state and sometimes war is necessary, especially when you only have two options. What are the two options of Russia had? Do nothing and let the continued Nazi occupation and hell and terrorism continue on their border. Threats to their security continue, or to use the tool of war and smash what is threatening them and smash the injustices. And what I'm ready to tell folks is that we are not liberals. We are not simply out here to, make ourselves feel good, to look around the world and say, I want a world that that I could feel a little bit better about. This war thing is too much. Leave imperialism alone. Leave my middle class nice position alone. Just have imperialism without less war and a little bit less racism. That's essentially what liberalism is. We are Marxist-Leninists. We are communist. We scientifically analyze the world, and then we take decisive action to use that information to make it better. And war, and I think a good ending note of this is that the absolute humiliation and injustice and exploitation that the workers and oppressed people of the world endure daily, hourly, by the minute is far, far worse than the war and the revolution it's going to take to throw off the enemy, the imperialists, and to form a new world and a better society. Comrade William, those are my closing thoughts. Any closing thoughts for this session?
Yeah, absolutely. So, firstly, I completely agree with you that Marxism is a tool of analysis for the world perspective. It isn't a doctrine, it isn't a dogma. There isn't a list of rules that we have to follow. Marxism-Leninism is a philosophical tool that helps us analyze the world around us. And that tool is dialectical and historical materialism. Dialectical and historical materialism is the philosophical underpinnings of the Marxist-Leninist ideology. And using that as a base, all communists can use that as a tool of analysis to analyze the world around us and the current situation of the world today. Secondly, sorry, I'm completely lost. Secondly,
go ahead.
Anti-imperialism is the biggest contradiction in today's society. You cannot claim to be a communist or a socialist without being an anti-imperialist. Lenin made that pretty clear in 1917 when he helped carry out the Bolshevik Revolution. There were certain material conditions that helped give way to the Russian Revolution. And I think one of the key factors of that revolution was the fact that the Bolshevik Party, under Vladimir Lenin, was an anti-imperialist party. It wasn't just communist. It wasn't just a progressive party. It was also anti-imperialist. It analyzed the international situation and understood that imperialism was the biggest contradiction of society. So we cannot progress, we cannot succeed as communists without first being anti-imperialist. So when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to Syria, when it comes to Palestine, when it comes to any international conflict, we have to analyze it from an anti-imperialist perspective. Who is the beneficiary of the war that is currently happening? And who are the victims? Well, in Syria and Ukraine, I can tell you the exact same thing. The beneficiary of these conflicts were the US government and the US military complex and their allies here in Britain and Western Europe. NATO is a Nazi fascistic organization. And I am just saying that because I disagree with them. I disagree with that because they literally, historically are. Many former Nazis and fascists are now currently members of NATO and are directly involved in the decision-making of NATO decisions. So when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to Palestine, when it comes to Iraq, when it comes to Iran, when it comes to Syria, when it comes to Libya, when it comes to Yemen, country after country, lie after lie, imperialists have benefited from the genocide and the mass murder of innocent people across the globe, mainly for oil, for political power, and for political influence, and to exploit the people and resources of the countries in which they invade. And as communists, we have to vehemently oppose that. We are anti-imperialists to a strong extent. So as an anti-imperialist, I absolutely support Bashar Qasim al-Assad of Syria. I supported Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. I supported Saddam Hussein of Iraq. I support the current government in Yemen, who are fighting against imperialist death squads. And I stand with Russia and the People's Republic of Donetsk and Luhansk in the Donbass region. Russia is only fighting this war because Ukraine and their neo-Nazi death squads have continuously mass murdered 15,000 innocent people over an 8-year period. And Russia has finally had enough of this on their own border and are now defending themselves and those two new nations against neo-Nazi death squads. So I think it is of utmost importance that Marxist-Leninists and communists in today's era, in today's epoch of platform runaway capitalism, that we stand strongly, not with just socialist and actually existing socialist nations. Of course, communists support China, Vietnam, Laos, Cuba, and the DPRK. But anti-imperialists should also support countries like Nicaragua, Venezuela, Belarus, Syria, Palestine, obviously, is a must. And I think a lot of communists nowadays are too afraid to voice their opinion of their support of these countries because they're scared, because they've listened to too much Western media. They think that Putin is the bad guy. They think that Venezuela is a country that has mass starvation and disease and poverty. They think that Belarus is an authoritarian, dictatorial, reactionary government. They think that Syria used chemical weapons against their own people. They think Muammar Gaddafi gave his troops Viagra to mass rape and pillage villages in Libyan villages. They think that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Again and again, these theories and conspiracy theories have been debunked. None of them are true. They were all lies by the US and imperialist-backed governments. Muammar Gaddafi didn't give his soldiers Viagra to rape his own people. Saddam Hussein didn't have weapons of mass destruction. In current-day Nicaragua and Venezuela, crime rates and poverty and unemployment are fairly low in comparison to Western nations. Nicaragua is doing significantly well under this Christian Socialist Party that currently runs Nicaragua. They're doing fairly well. Venezuela under Nicolas Maduro and obviously Hugo Chavez, amazing socialist revolutionaries. Bashar Kazim al-Assad is an amazing anti-imperialist who deserves the support of all anti-imperialists and Marxist-Leninists across the world. Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus also warrants support by anti-imperialists. I'm sorry, I'm running a little bit, but a lot of modern day socialists and communists seem to only think only 5 countries in the world deserve support: China, Vietnam, Laos, Cuba, and the DPRK. And that's not true. Those countries obviously are worthy of support. They're the actual existing socialist nations of the world. They're the 5 remaining red stars of the world. But there's also anti-imperialist countries. And those anti-imperialist governments, whether or not they're socialist, are directly helpful to the international proletariat. And they stand vehemently and staunchly against US hegemony and monopolistic capitalism. And countries like Belarus, Syria, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Russia, they also deserve support. So sorry for the long rant, but yeah, I'm done now. I promise I'm done now. But yeah, I think it's important that nowadays self-proclaimed Marxist-Leninists should not only support actual existing socialist countries, but should also support anti-imperialist countries. And they should recognize that anti-imperialism is the main contradiction of modern-day capitalism. And you cannot be a communist. You cannot claim to be a communist without firstly and primarily being an anti-imperialist. And that's my main take from today.
Thank you, brother. Well, that's going to do it for our show. Very good. This concludes our study of the foundations of Leninism. If you didn't watch the previous chapters of this discussion, I'm going to make a playlist for people to watch. We won't be here next week, but we'll have something in the works for the week after that. So if you could raise your fist with me, brother, and we'll do our ending chant. Repeat after me. Dare to struggle.
Dare to struggle.
Dare to win.
Dare to win.
All power to the people.
All power to the people.
Right on. Thank you, everyone.